Paranormal Dimensions is a regular feature on Mondays on the Paranormal UK Radio Network.
This is Eric Mintel. You're listening to the Paranormal UK Radio Network, the UK's biggest paranormal radio network. And this is Paranormal Dimensions with David Young.
Hello, welcome to the show. Thanks for that intro, Eric. Right, I've got a few call-outs for a few people. Got Sasha Christie, Liverpool, Merseyside, UK. Gert J. Brouwer, who's a breeder, Netherlands. And Terry Ray, Indiana, Pennsylvania, USA. Right, today's show should be quite fun. We're looking at the dark side of Florida. We've got a young man. I'm going to call him a young man. Mark Muncy. He runs the Hellview Cemetery. I've got written down here.
That was our old haunted house. Yeah.
Well, okay. You've introduced yourself. Welcome to the show, Mark Muncy.
Hi, gang. How you doing? Yeah, I'm glad to be here. So
yeah, it's great. It should be a fun show, this one, rather than the you're looking at the dark side of Florida. When all us Brits come to Florida, we like the bright side of it. So
yeah, we kind of take you off the beaten path. That's what we do. We are Erie, Florida, a book series. Erie, Florida, Freaky Florida, and Creepy Florida was our newest one. We're running out of adjectives, but there's still way too many books.
I think there's a few out there, isn't there?
And so, what it was is I ran a haunted house for 20 years locally in Tampa Bay area. That was called Hellview Cemetery, and we based it all on local lore and legends. It was all spooky, scary things, and we just, instead of having a werewolf jump out at you, we had a skunk ape jump out at you.
Oh, right.
And that's our Bigfoot for those over there, or Sasquatch or whatever. I'm not sure what the UK equivalent is of that.
Yeah, we know about Bigfoot and Sasquatch,
okay.
So and the Abominable Snowman. Whether they're all kind of related, I don't know, and whether they're the same creature, I don't know. But so that was just it. We did our haunted house on that. Now a lot of people, and we started putting these spooky versions of the legends on our website at oldhellview.net, and people would come and they would ask about certain characters and certain things, and that made me happy. That, there were people actually, instead of just most people going through the haunted house, something jumps out at them, they just scream. They don't care what it was. But there were people who were really into it. So we self-published a couple little books in the early days of self-publishing, that were just the stories from our website. And we mostly did that because a lot of our stories were getting copy-pasted onto things like Reddit and, No Sleep, and, Creepypasta was a big thing at the time. And we were like, people were coming in going, oh, you copied this, you copied that. I'm like, no, they copied us. Right. So which one was the first one? Was it Erie, Florida?
Yeah, what happened was the city shut us down. We had too many people coming through my haunted house, because it was my backyard, basically. Yeah. 5,000 people a weekend coming through our backyard. So yeah, it's time to shut it down. So that we had all these stories, didn't know what to do with it. So we compiled them and we decided to go traveling. And we traveled 5,000 miles and never left the state of Florida. That's how big Florida is.
Yeah.
And we came up with our first book, Erie, Florida, which is myths, monsters, legends, and the history behind them. And we go from the Panhandle across the state and then all the way down to Key West, and hit everything from UFOs to Robert the Doll down in Key West. So.
And the second one would that have been Creepy, Florida?
The second one was Freaky because Erie became a bestseller.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, Erie became a bestseller and was the best-selling book our little History Press publisher had ever had. So they freaked out and were like, "Hey, remember you said you had all those extra stories? You do a sequel? Sure." And my lovely and talented wife, Carrie Schultz, she's an illustrator. So all those monsters and ghosts that wouldn't pose for anything but, blurry photos, she brings them to life in illustrations in the book. So Freaky, we got to do a lot more deep dives. We got to go into a lot more history of places. And again, we traveled another several thousand miles and still never left the state. And then while we were doing that, we were secretly working on our third book, which just came out last October, called Creepy, Florida. And that one is all ghosts, all paranormal spectral entities, through the, or what we like to call, preternatural entities. For those Shirley Jackson fans. Yeah. Because
they sound really good, actually.
Yeah, instead of supernatural, we like it preternatural. It's just stuff we don't understand yet. There's obviously phenomena. It's just something we don't know what it is. So we call it preternatural. The preternatural of one generation becomes the natural of the next.
Right.
So like a long time ago, people didn't believe in magnets. Magnetism, witch stuff. So. Don't study it. You can't do that. And now it's, chiropractic medicine is slowly becoming the norm. Because it's still, a lot of people don't buy it. They still, it's not real medicine.
Sure.
So, and that's, so it's one of those, like I said, the preternatural one becomes the natural the next.
Yeah. I mean, just going back to your Hellview Cemetery, how big was it, actually?
It's about 1,500 square feet, my backyard, and it eventually moved into the front yard too. It went all the way around we never actually went into my house. That was one of the things we were really good designers. We had worked in the haunted house industry for years. Most of my volunteer staff, we did it all for charity. And it was, twists and turns, usual, jump scares and little boot holes, stuff like that. We had soundtrack every year. We had a theme every year, and again, we based it all on local lore and legends.
Well, did you start out somewhere like Disney World or somewhere?
No, down here in Tampa Bay. It was where I worked was at Universal Halloween Horror Nights. I was there for the first few years of that.
Right, yeah.
And when it was first coming.
I wonder if you were there when I was there. Yeah, you might have been. I've been there a few times, so you could have been.
I did it a lot in the early 90s through 96.
Yeah, so
and that's when we started doing.
So that's when we started doing
Hellview.
Yeah, may well have been there when you were there. That's great. Now, what are your own personal beliefs? Obviously, if you're interested in all this, you must believe in a lot of the stories you read about and tell about.
Well, we've seen some unusual things over the years, and I've had experiences even all the way back to my childhood that kind of started me on this path and got me interested in the unusual. But to call it a believer is a term I don't like. It's one of those, it's like, it's just, I want to know more.
Yeah.
I want to understand.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean. There's a difference between being a believer and a knower, isn't there? When you know something.
Yeah, exactly. It's, that was, I love the, was it MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network here in, America. They have a shirt that just says, I know, with a little UFO above it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, see, that's great. They're the knowers. They're not the, I want to believe. They are the, it is what it is.
Sure,
it's there. UFOs, are there. So, and that's just it, and like I said, even with UFOs, we were just at a big UFO conference in Orlando last week, the first ever UFO con with, Nick Pope.
Yeah, Nick is a friend of mine, yeah. Yeah, I know he lives
he's a super nice guy.
Yeah, he's a great bloke.
He was there. He was the headline guest, and he was super nice to everybody. And, we were discussing, he and I were discussing a few things, and it was one of those things. It was like, now it's validation. That's what the internet has brought. And and now with the UFO files from the Navy, the U.S. Navy leaking.
Absolutely.
That, show pilots.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Showing aircraft, trained F-16 pilots going, whoa, what is that? That's doing things I can't do. And that footage comes out, and then suddenly, it's no longer just Coast to Coast AM and Para shows talking about UFOs. It's on ABC and CNN and BBC and Fox News, and everybody's talking about UFOs because now it's legit. We've got to study it.
Yeah, it's not just the internet anymore.
Yeah. So again, believers, it becomes knowers, and that's just it with ghosts. I think it's the same thing. I think at some point we're going to figure it out. I mean, there's so many people who see them. Now there are people who just don't. And so there's some reason they don't. And that's why some people don't believe and, or don't feel and, or don't sense anything. And that's, something that, again, hopefully at some point science catches up and we can actually study it without people getting laughed at.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I'm a great believer. I think a lot of these things are connected anyway. In the paranormal, like ghosts and, spirits and, magic and everything else. I'm sure it's all connected in some way. And the UFO phenomena, of course. Yeah,
that's what, we've been, when we first started in this, where we were they call us paranormal journalists over here, that because we don't do ghost investigations, we don't do skunk ape hunts, we don't do UFO watches, but we go with teams that are doing ghost hunts, Bigfoot hunts, and UFO watches, and other things, lake monster searches and stuff. So we're getting their stories. And then we're also experiencing some unusual things while we're there. And that's where our books come from. That's all these journeys and interviews with witnesses and all that. It's getting the story, getting the heart. That's what we want. And then we go into the history archives and the libraries and dig into the history of it. Why is this ghost here? Why is this space, this area special for UFOs? How long has it been going on? How many times has, Bigfoot been seen here?
Where do you think your favorite spot in Florida is?
Oh gosh, it's so hard to narrow them down. I think our most popular is Robert the Doll down in Key West. He's a haunted doll. He was the toy of Robert Eugene O'Neill, who was a little boy who had him. And there's all these legends that he was built by a voodoo priestess and all this other stuff. No, he was a toy from a German company. And you could buy him in a catalog, and he was, pretty expensive, but Robert's parents were rich. So they bought this for their little boy. And as soon as they got it, weird stuff started happening. He starts breaking things, and, the servants are all quitting in droves. And they ask him why, and they go, well, the doll's talking, and the boy is talking in a different voice, and it's crazy. So they grab their son, and they go, all right, Robert, you've got to stop doing this. And he's like, I'm going to go by my middle name, Eugene. And the doll's going to go by my name, Robert, because he wants it, and we don't want any more confusion. So nowadays, we'd have given that kid some Ritalin, and we wouldn't have a story. But now we've got him, and he's been around 115 years. Just had his 115th birthday a couple weeks ago, and the doll has been haunting Key West forever. There are rules when you go visit him at the Fort East Martello Museum where he's at, where if you break the rules, bad things happen. There's a wall of letters behind him.
Really?
They're all digitized now, but they were, up until Hurricane Irma, they were all just letters everywhere you could flip through. But now they're digitized on a screen and they flip through on the screen. But they're all right there, and it's, if you take his picture without permission, bad things happen. If you're rude to Robert in any way and call him names or, just anything, bad things happen. And so you wonder what the bad things are. Well, you read those letters, and it's all those letters are thousands of people, including 2 former presidents of the United States, who wrote him to apologize and say, we're sorry, Robert. We didn't mean to upset you. And you realize how serious this is, because some of my favorite, this is actually kind of a fun one. This is my favorite, was, this guy goes, Dear Sir Robert, I like they called him Sir, I'm sorry I made fun of your leather face and called it stupid. Leather is actually very nice for a face, and you are quite handsome. Please remove your curse. We get the message. Please fix my eye, my Xbox, and my marriage. And I love that was the order he put them in. I thought that was just fantastic. But I mean, you're talking car crashes.
Sorry, can I interrupt? Who were the presidents that you mentioned?
Okay, I normally don't like to name names, but one was Bill Clinton and one was George Bush.
Oh, okay. Yes.
W. Bush.
Sorry to interrupt you. I was just inquisitive there.
Yeah, exactly. And so, we all know what happened to both of those guys. But George W.'s was actually just wishing him a happy 100th birthday.
Yeah.
But still being polite to Robert. You don't poke the bear. That's one of our rules. When we travel, don't poke the bear. Don't try to break the rules. So we even, our caption for our photos of Robert actually have very special captions to say printed with permission of Robert the doll, because we asked his permission to print them. But he's the inspiration. This doll is so infamous. He's the inspiration for a writer who made a movie called Child's Play. So he's the inspiration for Chucky. So, because the stories of this doll moving around and doing things on its own just go, hundreds of years.
Yeah, so, that is a creepy film, actually. Yeah.
Yes, quite a bit. But, so that's probably our favorite place to go, because there's a couple other stories in that same museum. That museum is an old Civil War fort, called the Fort East Martello Museum. And it's kind of an odd, kitschy art museum now, but they also have these weird artifacts. They also have the tombstone of Elena Demilios, which is right next to Robert, in the room right next to Robert. And she was the corpse bride. Basically a German immigrant came and said he was a count, and he was this genius inventor, and he could cure her tuberculosis. His name was Count von Kassel. And this is World War II. And this little Spanish, immigrant lady was like, okay, help me. And then she died, and he felt terrible. So he went to her family and said, I am a count, and I will build this mausoleum for her. Don't let her be buried in a pauper's grave. She was the love of my life, and all this. And they're like, okay, hey, free tomb, free mausoleum and all that. He installed a phone into the mausoleum so he could call her from the grave. And then he started and he would visit her every night, and the town just thought it was actually kind of cool. But then he stopped visiting her, and people started realizing something was up. And then in town, he was seen buying like gallons of perfume and lots of strange materials. And finally, a paperboy saw him dancing with something he said looked like a Frankenstein monster. So the sister and the police show up. And it's been years, and they finally show up, and he's like, oh yeah, she's here. We're having dinner. And they go in the other room, and he's covered her in plaster of Paris and kind of done crude wiring through her, and made her his wife. And he has her he made a mask of papier-mâché over her face, and she's coated in perfume so she didn't stink. And so he gets arrested. And it turns out he's not a count. His name's Carl Tanzler, and he was an immigrant to Zephyr Hills, not Key West, and he had traveled down. He was already married and had 4 kids, and moved to Key West, pretended to be a radar technician, and got jobs at hospitals and other things without, any qualifications for any of it, and just bluffing his way through everything because of the German accent, I guess. It's crazy. And then, he goes to trial. But they can't arrest him because the statute of limitations was over. He'd been doing it for so long they couldn't arrest him.
Oh, right.
And so he goes free. He becomes a writer of science fiction and wrote for Amazing Fantasy and some other stuff like that. Always about loves of beyond the grave. And he's just insane story. And poor Elena, he eventually blew up her mausoleum because he was so mad he couldn't have her back. And that's the tombstone that's there, is the pieces of her blown up mausoleum.
Mm. It's pretty creepy, yeah.
That's all in one museum.
I've actually been to Key West. It's a beautiful place, but
it's a wonderful town.
Unfortunately, I didn't know about that at the time. I can't think what year it was I went, but I didn't know it was there. It's obviously been there a few years. It must have been something I just missed out on. But,
those were all both from Robert's been around for 100 years, but he's only been in the museum for about 20 years. And then Elena, they only recently recovered her tombstone and all that for the museum, but that story goes back to the 40s.
Yeah.
So that would probably be the best place to go, just because you get more bang for your buck. Key West, it's got Haunted Cemetery, you got Captain Tony's Saloon, which is it was originally the Sloppy Joe's, which is where Hemingway used to go drink all the time. But now it's Captain Tony's, who was another colorful Florida history character, who was smuggling drugs out of the fire station in Key West. Then he got voted mayor after that.
I think I remember seeing the name of that bar.
Yeah, it's a great place, and it's a lot of fun. And in the bar is the old hanging tree for the town, grows up right through the middle of the bar, and there's tombstones throughout the bar that are like in the floor, and legends of witches and ghosts and all that in there. So it's always fun. But yeah, Key West itself is just a great little, it's definitely a fun place to visit.
There's a lot of voodoo as well in Florida, isn't there?
Oh yeah, all over the place. We have a great story out of St. Petersburg of a lady who was the voodoo queen of Tampa Bay, and her name is Minnie Lightning, and she has little lizard men that would come out at night and try to catch you if you were out unawares on the south side of St. Petersburg. And so that story was one we used in our haunted house several times, and we were like, but I'd never really looked into it, the history of it. And it goes into some dark history as well, because what it really was it was a combination of several legends. One was a lady who ran a boarding house, and she was, they used to say that she kept in, circus folk, because this area was like the winter home for Ringling, and a bunch of other circuses would all come down here to try to get Ringling's cast-offs. The ones Ringling didn't take, they could take. So all the little circuses came down here too. There's a whole town just across the bridge from Tampa Bay called Gibsonton that was founded by freak show people, and it was where Lobster Boy finally passed away a few years ago, and some other stuff. I'm digressing, sorry. But I wander with these stories because they all connect. But Minnie Lightning was basically what it was there was a lady who ran this boarding house, and she had some little people staying there, and they burned her house down because she was a Mennonite. So Minnie Lights, Mennonite, then maybe that's where the story connects. But then we find out about, where do the alligator people come in? Maybe the circus folk looked weird or something. But no, we find out that was actually a story from Gibsonton. Had nothing to do with St. Pete. But the name carried over. What we found was there was, on the south side, which is where the poorer people lived, in the 30s, when St. Pete was the alligator farm capital of the world, not Miami at that point, because the railroads were still, kind of hit or miss and stuff. To draw tourists in, they used to kidnap local children. 1920s. They used to kidnap local children that were out on the streets at night, and then throw them in the alligator pit and let them be chased for the tourists.
Lovely.
Yeah, exactly. And we're like, that can't be true. That cannot be true. But while we were in the St. Pete Museum of History's archives, they had a fan. Like you would hold a handheld fan to blow, to cool yourself off in the Florida heat while you were watching the show, and it had like a little copper tone style ad with the little kid getting his butt bit. It was, this was a alligator biting a small African American child's, buttocks. And saying, come see at St. Petersburg. So Minnie Lightning, the voodoo queen of St. Pete, was actually, a cautionary tale. Don't stay out late, because the guys would come with their lanterns and come catch you. And that was the real Minnie Lights.
That's actually quite creepy when you think about the reptilians that we hear about, and the...
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of, there's a connection there, isn't there?
Yeah, exactly. And that's, you start thinking about that. You start putting these things together, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is, all these things, like you said, they interconnect. It was funny when we started this, the UFO groups, still shun the Bigfoot groups. And the Bigfoot groups shun the ghost hunters. And the ghost hunters, don't talk to the Bigfoot people. And it was one of those things, what we started seeing in the early days of social media is we started realizing the overlaps. Bigfoot's footprints just stop, in the middle of nowhere. What else does that? Well, some alien phenomena and some ghostly phenomena, and then there's, weird flashes people see before they see, a ghost sometimes. And that ties in, there's a weird flash some people see before they see Bigfoot. And there's a weird flash some people see before they see UFOs. So it's like, okay, what's this weird flash phenomena? And only recently is that even being discussed, because most people just ignored it. And so we start realizing it is a lot interconnected. And there is definitely some stuff we don't understand. Yeah. And hopefully we start on the process of correlating all this and we can figure it out.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I mean, even the UFO conferences over here, you tend to get a mixture of people now that are interested in all kinds of things, you know, the paranormal, because we're beginning to see connections to it all. You know?
Yeah, exactly. It's becoming it's a boom, you know, generation. I mean, you, here in the States, you know, it's, if you watch the Travel Channel or Discovery Channel, I know they got them over there too, but, if you watch Discovery Channel, Travel Channel, or any of those shows, there's no travel shows on it hardly anymore. There's no, you know, Discovery, you know, and History Channel even. It's all Ancient Aliens, Ghost Adventures, Dead Files, you know, oh gosh, so much Dead State, and, you know, just all these, you know, ghost stories and monster hunter, you know, mountain monsters and river monsters, and it's like, okay, so Destination Unknown, Destination Truth, it's all that stuff now, and they realize that's where people want, and so it's become this, you know, boom. And that's, I think that's, you know, one of the reasons why our books do so well is, you know, we're just riding that wave, I guess, you know, for dark tourism, because that's a thing. People buy our books and they use them as roadmap guides, because we lay them out north to south so that you can just follow them. And we have people who come up to us at conventions and, you know, and book signings, and they've got the previous book all bookmarked, where all the places they've been. Yeah, with photos and stuff of their own. That just makes our heart grow 3 sizes. You know, it's awesome.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, I really wish I'd known about them, because I used to work over there for a while, you know, when I was in my job. I worked at, near Pensacola, you know, Fort Walton Beach.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Fort Walton. There's a great haunted restaurant there.
Is there? Oh, right. You can tell me about that in a minute. Yeah, I worked on the Hobart Field Air Base there. Because that's my background, you know, working on I worked on the AC-130s, and it was then that I realised that Gulf Breeze was just down the coast. So one day, I took a few drives down there. I'm obviously not going to see any UFOs, but it was just interesting to see the area, you know. I don't know what your opinion is of the Gulf Breeze UFO sightings.
I'll be happy to tell you.
Yeah, sure.
I think there were several hundred sightings over, a very long period in the early 80s. And then Ed Waters comes out, and he's got his photos. And it blows it, you know, off to the stratosphere. It's amazing. His photos are incredible. It's amazing. And then years later, he's debunked. He moves out. And, they find the model he used, and they find the camera, you know, and he's like, oh, that was disinformation. That's them trying to hide this. It's like, no, you got sloppy. You know, it's fine. You know, admit it. But that still doesn't debunk the several hundred other sightings that other people had. And we've been up there many times, and there's still sightings to this day of unusual stuff up there all the time. And, particularly, but you've got, you know, where we have an issue with UFOs, I have this, my thing with it is that we don't know what it is. It's, you know, I know it's, you know, people see stuff. People see unusual things in the sky, and it changes them forever. And, you know, but then, you know, all right, there's something in the sky. I don't know what it is. That's crazy. Then the leap from that to it must be aliens from another dimension or galaxy. I don't get the leap. You know, that's where I go, okay, wait a minute. There's some more steps in between we've got to find first. So that's where I go, it could be extraterrestrials. It could be a government program that we don't know.
Yeah, sure.
We're working on the C-130.
And one day, all of those, that's right, yeah.
Exactly. There's a million other things it could be as well. So that's why you can't just leap to that. And it is definitely craft we don't have the capabilities of matching that we know of. At one point, I was a very young lad driving home, and I saw F-16s escorting what I thought was a flying saucer. It looked like this very unusual craft in broad daylight. I was coming home from high school, so I was like 17, 18, and I see this thing, and I'm like racing home, going, "Oh my God, it's you know, we're announcing we've made contact with aliens. This is amazing. I got to turn on the news to figure out what's going on." And I was telling my parents, and my parents were like, you're imagining things. I'm like, no, it's real. I saw it. And that was the day they announced the stealth bomber and premiered it. And it was the first time it had been shown, and it was shown in Tampa Bay at MacDill Air Force Base right across from my house. And so, yeah, to me, that was a UFO at the time.
Yeah, that's right.
So they could be testing other things. The big things we've been hearing about up in the Gulf Breeze area and Pensacola area is a USO, an unidentified submerged object that tends to become UFOs. One becomes the other. Because basically the one story we had, amazing witness, he was a boat captain, he was out on the water, and his depth finder goes from 400 feet to 12 feet in a second. And he's like, either he's, drifted off course onto a sandbar, or a whale's coming up underneath him, or, something unusual. So he runs out to the deck, and he's trying to figure it out, and he sees this black shape, bigger than his entire boat, and, even, stretching behind him, and it comes up out of the water without making a sound, just maybe a hum, he said. It was like a low hum. But he wasn't even sure he heard it. It just more like felt it. And it was a big, black, triangular craft that made no noise, and it comes out, and it hovers above him at about 100 feet, then it shoots up to 500 feet, some lights wink on around the corners, and then it skips out super fast, like gone in a blink of an eye. So, we ask him, had you been drinking that night? And he's like, I'm a boat captain. Of course I had. But the hairs on his arms were standing on end, and we were like, did you take pictures? He's like, of course I did. But it was a black thing against a black sky. And so his phone is just, a bunch of black stuff. You can't see anything on it. And I always tell people, if you don't buy that, try to take a picture of your nightstand in the dark without the flash on from your cell phone.
Yeah.
Right next to you and see what it comes out like. It's just going to be a big black picture. But we think that might be some sort of government project, because you've got Eglin Air Force Base up there. You've got Pensacola Naval Yard. And if there's something that goes under the water and also flies, we're better to test it than with, two military bases that do the same things right there.
We've got Herbert Field as well, remember?
Yeah, exactly. That's all right there. And, and Herbert Field, man, your C-130, what was the project where they were trying to do basically the VTOL and the stop with the C-130s?
The AC-130s, yeah, that's the one I worked on. The laser alignment, all TV cameras on. The laser alignment, and they've used a lot in the Gulf Wars, and
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, we won't go.
I know. So so that area's done a lot of testing. And if you drive by there, if you're like heading out to Fort Walton Beach or Destin, we go up a lot to Destin.
Yeah, Destin.
And you drive through it. If you're watching your GPS, it just suddenly only thing you can see is the road you're on, because everything else is blacked out. Because it's all military top secret. Which is amazing to do when you're driving through there, and suddenly it's like, wait, okay, there's a road here, but it's not on the map. All right, sure. It's almost like Area 51, the way they treat it there.
Yeah.
It was funny coming out of there. We got chased by black helicopters, which was funny. I know it was just a coincidence, but it was. I was like, oh, bucket list.
Well, you never know.
Bucket list. We got black helicopters on us. Now Fort Walton, you were talking about. There's a great restaurant there called the French House, and it was one of those catalog houses you could buy from the Sears catalog, and they would mail you all the parts to build a house, and you could do it with minimal carpentry. And the house is still there, survived hurricanes, survived floods, and now it's a big restaurant. And there's several ghosts known to be in there. And the owners, he collects a lot of World War II memorabilia, so he has it up in his the attic area you can go visit. He's got Nazi flags and liberated POW camp stuff, and it's pretty amazing. But downstairs he has this big painting of two little girls, and it's his aunt's. Apparently, he brought it from when he moved down from Ohio, and he says since he brought it to that house, the girls tend to change positions in the painting at night and freak out the customers.
You're kidding.
So a little bit of haunted mansion goodness there, I guess.
Yeah, either that or there's two paintings and he swaps them about.
Exactly, he's flipping. That is quite possible. Our favorite legend in that area is the Brooks Bridge. It goes from Fort Walton Beach over to Destin.
Yeah, another one. Yeah. It's changed quite a lot over the years, hasn't it?
Oh my gosh,
it's really building up now.
Yeah, even in the last few years, it's higher than it is wide now because of all the big buildings and hotels. So that'll give you a little warning the next time a hurricane comes up that way.
I know. Well, the first time I went there, it was actually just like a wooden pier over the thing, and there was like I think there was I know there was a restaurant bar there with a wooden pier type thing, but ever since then there's all high-rise buildings and hotels shooting up. It's got really busy.
Yeah, it's a crazy place. But that bridge, the story goes, if you go out there on a specific night, and it varies by who tells the story, it's usually the night after a full moon. You stand on that bridge, and a pack of spectral wolves will come running along the beach and then run out under the bridge, like on top of the water, and then disappear. And we were up there because a couple people had said they'd seen them. So we were like, okay, we've got a few, corroborating witnesses, mentioning it. So that's enough for us to go and team up with a paranormal group. And so we got a local group up there, and we went up with them, and we're just sitting out watching the bridge, and we're thinking, this is weird. We're sitting on this interstate bridge, in the middle of the night, at midnight, waiting for something to happen. And, but there were dozens of people. Lots. And I'm like, what's going on? So I start talking to the people, and every one of them was someone who had witnessed it and wanted to see it again. And we're talking all age groups, all spectrum of people who were locals, people who were just visiting, who'd come back. And that was amazing to us. So suddenly you've got what these people are obviously seeing something, and, to draw them back there year after year after year, month after month, it's crazy. So, and none of them could remember exactly when they saw it, for dates and times and stuff, but they'd all seen it. So, one guy comes out every night looking for it. So he says, so he bought a house nearby just so he could look for him again.
Yeah, I must admit,
that's an expensive area to live.
I never heard any of these stories while I was over there, I must say.
That was the beauty of the haunted house, was we were getting all these letters and emails of all these insane, crazy legends, and it was like, what do we do with them? Well, we got to start looking into them. That was the whole point of the books was, let's see what we can find, and just every one of them would just be some gem. And, and we'd be like, okay, well, this one we can never verify because there's no, second corroboration. But then sure enough, I'd bury, a week later, I'd reach out. That was the beauty. I could not have written these books 20 years ago. With the beauty of social media, I was able to reach out to groups like, you knew you grew up here when, and I would reach out to those groups and say, hey, does anybody remember something weird happening in, 1965 in this town? And sure enough, every one of them had, would within a month would message me and go, oh, I do recall that. And it's like, now I got a second witness and I can verify it, and that's what we would look for.
I must admit, I mentioned UFOs a few times when I was working on the base, and I'd just get a funny look off people, it's like you do.
Yeah, exactly. You get all these, and that's just it. A lot of times, when we go to a place, we'll go to a hotel or something that's known for its ghosts, and, we'll ask about the ghosts when we come in. We'll say, hey, we're Erie, Florida. We're here staying because of this. And they go, oh, there's no ghost here. That's all made up by some kid. And we're like, oh, okay. And then as soon as the manager would leave, the clerk would come over and go, no, it's true. He's not here after dark. Come here. I'll tell you all about it. And it's like, yes. Or it was the opposite. Crew members and people would be like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. But then the manager would be like, oh yeah, it's been happening here since I've been here 20 years. And, it doesn't happen often, but, and it's like, oh, okay. And it's amazing to me. And then, we do our events and appearances. And that's where we get even more, because every time we do a signing, somebody comes up and goes, oh, have you discussed this? And I'll be like, we may have, but I'd love to hear your version. And sometimes it's stuff we have investigated, but it's a new version of the tale. It might bring us some more insight. Or it's the opposite. It's something brand new that we've never heard, and now I got a new thing to look into.
What about Pensacola Old Town? Is there any good stories from that?
That area, there's, Molly McCoy was a infamous bordello owner in that area. And she had Molly's girls. They were, she had very specific rules for her ladies. that ladies of the evening, and they had very specific rules. They had to walk out in pairs. They were never allowed to smoke in public. They had all these, specifically because they catered to a higher clientele. Although this is Pensacola, which was, a big naval yard, so they also catered to the sailors. But they always made sure they took special care of the sailors because, hey, that was their bread and butter. And so she got kind of carte blanche from the city. They basically let her get away with it because they knew she was providing an invaluable service for them, stuff they didn't have to deal with. She'd keep the sailors under control because, Molly, she had rules and they followed it or they weren't allowed to be with the girls. And, so when she passed away, eventually the bordello closed and the girls all, went their separate ways. But a few years later, people started hearing parties at the old house and people started seeing her walking along with some, shadowy figure. And, and then they'd see the girls, in pairs walking along and they would disappear the minute you got close, some spectral, a stone tape type, occurrence maybe. But Molly was said to talk to people and she would interact with you. And then what happened was, there was a great, paranormal team up there, got this wonderful EVP of her with electronics voice phenomena for those who don't know, where they just record and you never know what you're going to get on it. And, they asked her, Molly, who are you walking with? And she turned and said something, but they didn't hear it. But when they played the thing back, they had a vague outline of a shadowy shape and so they played it back. And, the EVP was, I walk with death. Which was very cool. And that gave me chills hearing that one. So, and I think that's the Pensacola Paranormal Society has that up on their website still.
I'll have to have a look at that, yeah. What about the old, now Tallahassee is the capital, isn't it, of Florida?
Yes.
A lot of people don't know that,
Yeah, because it's in the middle of nowhere, Florida. It's not down in... Yeah, so many people think, Orlando. I like to call Orlando our nation's capital just because so many people visit it.
I think a lot of people think that is the capital, but it isn't. But
yeah, no, it's the reason Tallahassee was picked for the capital was because it was halfway between Pensacola and St. Augustine, which at that point, when we first gained statehood, were the only two major settlements in Florida in the early 1800s, because the rest of Florida was full of Native Americans who would shoot at you and disease, alligators, and all the other normal stuff that Florida is known for. And that's why every European country passed us around like, some disease they didn't want. Here, take Florida. It's full of people shooting at you and bugs. Get rid of it. Yeah, you can have it. But finally when the United States got it, they needed a capital, and that happened to be the halfway point, which also happened to be a pretty prosperous Indian village, so they came in and, took it over. Yeah. And, as we did, as we poorly treated all of our Native Americans.
Yeah. So I imagine that's where the name came from, Tallahassee. I presume that's the Indian name, yeah.
That was the Indian name for the area. And that was the chief at the time, he was saying it was a great deal he had made. And it was only years later that he tried to reorganize a resistance and fight back when he realized he'd been, kind of screwed. But anyway, Tallahassee, its most famous legend is one we debunked, which was the Elizabeth Bellamy tombstone there, which is a lady that they call it the witch's grave or the Tallahassee witch grave. Right. It's in one of the main cemeteries downtown. It's this big colossal tombstone, and it has a poem on it from Edgar Allan Poe of Lenore. And so they say, oh, well, it's facing west while the other graves face east. So that means she was a witch because she's not allowed to rise and see when, the rapture comes and all the ghosts rise and face the east. All the bodies rise. She's facing the other way, so she can't see it. And, in this Edgar Allan Poe creepy poem, she must have been a witch. We debunked that. It's basically she was just very well loved by her husband, and he loved Edgar Allan Poe. So he put that poem on her beautiful tombstone that he spent a lot of money on because he was a very wealthy man. And the reason it's facing west is just because it's in the corner of the cemetery, and if it faces east, it's just facing the wall.
So it's quite a simple story behind it, really.
Yeah, exactly. And that, and so for everyone, we have some unusual thing. Yeah, there's one like that we go, oh. Now there are other ghosts in that cemetery that people see, and one of Napoleon's relatives is buried in that cemetery, which I always thought was fascinating. So
Napoleon, how did he manage to get there?
Yeah, how do you manage to get a cousin in a Tallahassee grave? Well, he does. Yeah. So there's there. So
it's pretty weird. So, well, do you, when you go out on these, you go out with other groups, do you go out looking for things to debunk? Because I think that's the best way to go, really, as an investigator, to actually look for the normal things.
Yeah, that's what we're there to, and most of the groups are there for that too. There are some that are immediately, I have a bad feeling this place is, super haunted and, there's demons and all this. And it's like, okay, that's fine. But we're here to just, please go about your business. Let's see what we can find. We'd like we want you to find the evidence. That's what we're here for is, documenting the evidence. And, but also we're documenting your study, so that we know you're not, moving things or, stuff like that. And some, people, some of the groups love us because of that. And some of the groups are a little, they're not happy with us sometimes. Although we tend to bridge the gap pretty well that people seem to like us, cause we don't interfere. We're just there to be extra witnesses on hand. And Carrie's there to get the eyewitness stories so that she can, sketch them, for the illustrations.
Yeah.
And that's all we do. And Carrie is like a ghost lodestone. Nothing happens to her. She can't feel anything, can't see anything. It's amazing. We could have some of the weirdest stuff happen around us. We were at a cemetery called Spring Hill Cemetery near Brooksville, which is north of Tampa Bay. And it's this nowhere cemetery. Civil War soldiers are buried there. A lot of former slaves are buried there. Several people were lynched there in the 50s. So it's got this really dark history. And, we were there looking for this one children's grave that supposedly, people get all kinds of recordings of little children's voices and giggles and stuff like that. And we started getting over there, and our producer, who is, we're filming a pilot for a, streaming service, called Eerie Travels. And so we were there for that. And we were, so this is pretty recent. And we were up there filming, and our producer suddenly, she seems to be a bit in tune to some of this stuff a little more than others. And she started gasping for air and, started getting, and then, I started getting a vertigo spell. I started getting really dizzy, and I wasn't sure what was going on because we're in the middle of, a couple miles from anywhere in this cemetery. And I'm like, whoa, we better step back to the car. And as we're getting there, it just, this dark, it just basically the whole cemetery went dark. And it was very odd. And we got, the camera crews are recording. So this is actually going to be in our pilot. So some unusual stuff. But my wife is over there taking pictures of butterflies on tombstones because she was completely oblivious to the whole thing. Even our cameraman's like, something weird's going on. I'm getting some unusual stuff on the camera. I'm getting some weird noises in the microphone. And she's just like, la, 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 la. Pretty butterfly, pretty butterfly. No idea. So that's when I always tell people, you may not believe because you may not see, but my wife doesn't. We've been to all these crazy places too. So yeah.
Does she get shocked by some of the things that do happen?
Oh, some of the, yes. She's had her mind opened a little bit. But not, again, still hasn't had that smoking gun for her yet.
Yeah, so her mind is quite closed off to it, really, more or less.
Yeah, exactly. It's just not in tune, but she really, 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 enjoys the stories. And, so she loves when the people talk to her and tell her what they saw. We were at that UFO con and somebody was talking about devil monkeys. And she was like, oh, no, that's something I have to draw. So she was, and her and this little lady talked for like 20 minutes, and she got a nice little character sketch out of it. And so we're going to look into it for a future story. So
yeah, it's interesting. I'm going to shoot back over to Pensacola now. Fort Pickens, have you ever been on that and done any investigation?
Oh, yes. Fort Pickens is an amazing place.
And that's why I asked, because they actually kept Geronimo there for a while, didn't they?
Yeah, they sure did. What was actually one of our big claim to fame was, when we were researching, the Geronimo for, his cell was supposedly haunted. And they used it as a tourist attraction for so long. But we wanted to, we were looking up for photos of him. And, there's this great, wonderful thing we have here in Florida called Florida Memory Project. It's, owned by the state, and it's lots of classic news photos and just anything you can get. It's an invaluable tool for a writer like me, when I don't want to go digging through archives for hours and hours and hours. And I can pull up a photo, and then you can get the printing rights for a pittance, and as long as you credit Florida Memory. Great for historian writers and or people just doing research. But one of the things they had was we were looking up everything we could. They had photos of Geronimo in Fort Pickens, for the newspapers and stuff in the area. And we looked at one though that was just Indian Native Americans being shipped to Pensacola. And it's a bunch of Native Americans sitting next to a train, just sitting on the ground. And what they didn't realize is that the third person sitting on the ground is Geronimo. So we submitted that to them that, hey, you need to correct this photo. This is a photo of Geronimo on his way to Fort Pickens. And so now it's listed in the Florida archives as picture of Geronimo and his tribe as they are being shipped to Fort Pickens. But that's what you do. You'll stumble on things like that sometimes when you're doing this, and you go, wow, look at that treasure we just found. Do we tell them? Oh yeah, of course we tell them. So the next guy does that. Yeah, so the next guy done that day for it. Plus, who knows what they might have done to the original eventually, if they didn't realize what it was, I don't think they'd have done anything terrible, but it's an amazing photo. But yeah, we went to Fort Pickens, and that was, the people there are amazing. The story of Fort Pickens itself is incredible, that the Union kept it through the whole Civil War, and they, with a handful of people, because they were told to keep the redoubt, the North Redoubt, which is on the other side of the bay, and something else, and they knew, you left us 20 guys. How are we supposed to hold this?
I don't think it saw much action. It didn't see any action at all, did it? I don't think.
Well, that's exactly what happens. The South comes in force, and they take the redoubt because the Union just abandoned it, because they wanted to hold Fort Pickens, and they knew that would hold the bay. And so the South comes up to Fort Pickens, and they're like, we're going to take it. Because I built it. The guy the engineer who built it was like leading the Southern troops. And the captain of the Union with the, talk about, balls of steel. He, if I can say that, sorry.
Yeah, sure. I had worse on here, don't worry.
Okay, good. He says, oh yeah, I've changed things. So you don't know this place anymore. And so they're like, and you're going to just waste a lot of men trying to get in here. Yeah. And all he had actually done was turn the cannons around to face inland. Instead of the port.
Yeah, so it's like a standoff, really, wasn't it?
It's just, that's all he'd done. He told him, I've done all these changes, you'll never get in. And that's all he did was move the cannons around. So the South never attacked.
Yeah.
He totally bluffed them. He held that fort with 20 men till reinforcements sailed up. And then he did have a good troop to hold it for the rest of the Civil War. And that's just amazing to me.
Yeah.
That just shows you how a good bluff can change history.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because if the South had taken that, they would have been the breadbasket for the South, and it could have fed their army a lot longer. And that may have changed the morale of some of the big battles.
Yeah. I know on my couple of visits there, I thought it's like a hellhole because it was so hot there. I can imagine in some of those cells, like Geronimo's cell. Yeah. He must have just roasted in that. I mean, I suppose you're more acclimatised to the temperatures, maybe, but to us British, but
oh gosh, no, you're 100% right. No, Florida is terrible. It's everybody's like, oh, it's such sunny weather all year. Yeah, we have 11 months of summer, which sounds great, but after you're on your 6 month of 96 degrees and 110% humidity, so it feels like 130. Yeah. People don't understand that humidity. They're like, oh, the desert, 125 degrees. Yeah, that sucks. But Florida at 96 is the same feeling, but it's just oppressive. You walk outside, you just are drenched in sweat, and everything makes harder to breathe, harder to move. It's atrocious. And that's why we don't do much traveling in the summer months. We do most of our research now, November through February. So we do all our trips because that's the only time that all the mosquitoes are dead.
Yes, right.
And, which is where we want them. And, the alligators are usually pretty sleepy because it's cold.
What about mosquito ghosts?
Yeah. Should be our state bird. I tell everybody every year we should make the mosquito the state bird because they're terrible.
Oh no, yeah.
One time we were at a haunted place called Harder Hall, which is right in the heart of the state, this old, hotel. And we were trying to go in. It's been abandoned for years and there's a big swamp out next to it. And, that used to be a beautiful lake and it's now just swamp. And we started to get out of the car and we started hearing this thing. It sounded like, tap, 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 tap. And I was sitting there going, man, is that like hail? Or, it's the sky is blue, but that does happen in Florida. We get some weird weather. And, it'll be pouring 1 minute and, sunshiny the next. It rains every day, but nobody here in Florida owns an umbrella because all you gotta do is wait 10 minutes and it'll go away. Yeah. And it'll be nice and sunny and humid. So we're there and we're listening to all that tapping. We're trying to figure out what it is. And we realize it's just mosquitoes dive bombing the car. Wow. It's like, yeah, I guess, we can get the picture from inside the car. It's fine.
I must say, I didn't suffer too much from mosquitoes when I was over there. Maybe it's not so much in the Fort Walton area. I know down in the Glades you get a lot more.
The beach areas, the beach areas it's not so bad. It's when you move inland that's the problem.
Yeah, because I suffer from them bad. If I get a mosquito bite over here, it comes up in a big lump. So I'm quite pleased they stayed away from me over there to a certain extent.
Yeah, just don't go in the Everglades and don't go in Ocala National Forest or the Green Swamp and you'll be fine.
Yeah, no, we did go in the Glades. Funny enough, when we went for one of those swamp boat things in the Glades, and it broke down. And they had to phone up and get another one. So we were in the middle of this big lake with alligators all around, getting from one boat to the other sort of thing.
That's kind of fun.
Bit hairy.
Yeah, a bit. Yeah, Everglades is crazy. And my favorite story out of the Everglades is the famous Flight 401. It was a American Airlines craft. And it was coming home from New York, and it was flying into Miami, and they couldn't tell if their landing gear was down, their nose gear. So they had the engineer had to climb down into what they called the hell hole, this bit under the cockpit, where there was a little tiny peephole, so you could look out and visually see that the landing gear was down, because it could just be a faulty indicator. So so he climbs down in there. Now, while he's doing that, while they're trying to figure things out, they accidentally turn off the autopilot. And the radar control, comedy of errors here. The radar control guy is falling asleep. Cool. So a lot of regulations change because of this flight. And they lose 10,000 feet very quickly, and they didn't know. And so when he gets down in the pit, and he sees the landing gears down, but he also sees trees. Oh, God. Yeah. And he's like, we're too low, and it's too late. They crash.
It sounds funny, but it isn't.
No, it's terrible. Lots of people die. But the pilot, the engineer, he lives for a little while, goes to a hospital. Surprising. There are a lot of survivors of this one. It's a pretty amazing thing, and considering it crashed in the middle of the Everglades, and they've got those airboats and other people trying to rescue them, and get these people out, and they're finding bodies floating up, and all that. It's, it's a pretty terrible thing. But what it spawns is American Airlines. It was a fairly new plane, and it survived, beat up, but semi-intact. So they start using parts from it in other planes that use the same parts. And then what happens is, on these other plane flights, the pilot of Flight 401 who died shows up. The engineer from Flight 401 shows up, and they warn the flight crews of unusual things, or they, beware, watch your oven. Your oven's gonna explode. And sure enough, the oven starts smoking. They have to land. The pilot shows up and says, hey, your engine's gonna burn out. And they go, and then sure enough, they, on the flight, one of the engines burns out. So it becomes a thing where they start, every time one of these guys reports it, American Airlines takes the logbook from that plane and deletes it and gives them a fresh logbook for their next flight. And they're covering it up. They don't want anybody to know about this. And then they start making it up because so many people start seeing it. It becomes a thing. Well, if you report it, you have to go to the psychiatrist and you're on leave. You can't pay. You don't get paid until you see the psychiatrist. So you're going to lose your job if you report it. So the people stop reporting it. But one of the vice presidents of the company is sitting in first class, and this guy sits up next to him and is talking to him. Some pilot's talking to him. And then the other pilot comes in and walks in, and he's like, well, who are you? And then the guy's gone. And he looks it up, and it's the pilot of Flight 401. Huh. And that's when he's like, okay, something has to be done. But then all the pilots and stewardesses that are having all these issues, they report to the FAA, the Federal Air Administration, and they start investigating this. And they realize American Airlines is changing all the logbooks and forcing, people to not report things. So it's actually the first government document from a government organization saying these things are being seen by people, credible witnesses. You can't hide this. And what American Airlines quietly does at this point is they admit they were wrong, but they also start taking off all the parts that they used from that plane to make sure they're never used again, and no one's ever seen the ghost since. So
interesting. I think I've actually seen that, but I don't think I've ever read that one, but I think I've seen the book on the shelf.
Yeah, they actually made a movie about it with Ernest Borgnine as the ghost. They cut it to just the engineer. They didn't make it the pilot and the engineer for the movie purposes. And it's called The Ghost of Flight 401.
Yeah.
And that's what brought that story kind of some national attention, or about the same time as Amityville came out. So.
Yeah.
And that's all out of Florida.
Yeah, I'll have to look out for that one. Have you? So, what have you got things planned? Have you got some more journeys planned? Because like you said, where's your next? What do you call it? A venue or meeting or conference?
Well, we're actually working on this project called Eerie Travels, which is going to be a book and a tie-in series. Hopefully on a streaming service near you at some point. We've been asked to pitch to a couple different services, so we're filming it now with a local Tampa Bay multimedia company. And they're going to, we've been doing travels again. We're hitting some stuff we've already done for the books, but we're also hitting a lot of new places. And for the first time, we're reaching out of the state. It's amazing.
Oh, really?
We went to South Carolina for the Lizard Man Festival, which is their Bigfoot. Yeah. He's a lizard guy, attacked a car in the 80s, and we got to talk to the main witness and the cop who investigated it, and we got to see the car that was they still have it with all the claw marks and stuff into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an amazing place, and that was a great little festival, so we got to do some filming there, and we're going to be all over the place, and we're going to try to hit all the United States, and then we may expand our dark tourism elsewhere and see what else we can come up with. So we might come give you guys a visit.
It'd be nice to come over here, yeah. It's what about New Orleans? It's not far down the coast, is it? It's a drive.
No, it's about 10 hours from us, and it is on the agenda. So that is definitely one of the major points of interest. You got to do New Orleans.
Yeah, I imagine there's a lot goes on there. I mean, I've got to say, when I went to New Orleans, it was one of those places that, when you're walking along the streets, around the back streets, you feel like you want to keep looking behind you all the time.
Yes,
I don't really get that feeling when I'm walking around in most of the states, but when I was in New Orleans...
New Orleans is definitely, if you go on the wrong street at the wrong time, yes, you will be murdered.
Yeah.
Not really. There are some uncomfortable elements around there, and it's cleaned up quite a bit. But it's still, there are places just to avoid, and that's any major city anywhere in the world.
No, but it's just that I think those streets are so small, and they remind you a little bit of the East End of London, some of the little streets, and you just feel like you want to walk, look behind you all the time.
Yeah, those older cities, like, St. Augustine, was built by the Spaniards in the 1500s. It's the oldest settlement, of European settlement in North America. 1500s. I know for you guys that's nothing. For us, that's
yeah. We've been here for millions of years.
Yeah. No, that's impossible. No one was alive in the 1500s. But that's for us that's ancient.
Yeah.
But those cities like that, New Orleans, some of those early cities had these little tiny roads and stuff that never got bigger. And where most of our cities, like St. Petersburg, where we live, was planned. It was a planned city in the 1920s. So it's big wide roads everywhere, and it's a grid, so it's easy to find everything.
Sure.
But people get confused, like First Street and First Avenue. Why are they two different? Well, one goes one way, one goes the other, and it's a grid. Yeah,
it's usually east and west and north and south, isn't it?
Exactly. And like if somebody has an address of 120 First Street, you're like, okay, it's somewhere between First Avenue and First Street. So,
yeah, I got a bit confused like that in Pensacola because that's a bit like that.
Yeah, they have an area that's like that. Yeah, they have a big area that's like that. But then they have all those streets that are named after trees. And are alphabetical.
That's right. Yeah.
That's so you're always like, if you're like, wait, is this oak or elm?
Yeah, chestnut. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Florida loves to name things, and that's one of the things we always point out in our books. We have a town that's in the Gulf that's a port, so they call it Gulfport. We're not very creative here. Mm-hmm. And things like that. And so so St. Petersburg was named because they flipped a coin. One of the guys' original home was Detroit, and one of the guys was originally from St. Petersburg, and so they flipped the coin, and whoever won it was going to get to name the city, either Detroit or St. Petersburg.
Oh, well, I don't think Detroit wouldn't sound right, would it?
No, New Detroit, it would have been interesting, right? So it's so there's lots of stories like that throughout our history, and so that's what we love. Some of the monster names down here. We got there's this town called Barden that has a skunk ape of lore that, walks around with a cane and a walking stick or a lantern, depending on the story. And he's always just seen kind of more like a relaxing Bigfoot. He just kind of sits by a creek. He never seems to be aggressive or anything. But, do they call him the Barden Beast? Do they call him the Barden Monster? No, he's called the Barden Booger.
Or is that a troll? Sometimes.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, exactly. No, he's the Barden Booger. And in the 60s, they wrote a song about him called the Barden Booger Boogie. And, so just, that's Florida for you.
That's brilliant. Anyway, when this show goes out, Mark, I'm hoping to get it out this next week. I'll put a lot of links and things to your goings on and all your things that are going on, because you've got some fantastic pictures on your page. Hope you don't mind if I steal a few and put them on my page. And,
go right ahead. That does, just give us some credit.
Sure.
Yeah, you can find everything we do at erieflorida.com. You can also order books from us. I'm not sure about the international shipping, but I know my wife will draw something in it for you, and I'll scribble some words in it for you for an autographed copy there.
Yeah,
you can order from there. You can also order prints of her art from there, and some jewelry that's been made from her art as well. We sell that a lot at a lot of the cons. People love skunk ape prints. One of our most popular is Pinky. He's our Nessie. He's again, Florida likes to name things. We have a beast that swims in a river, in the St. Johns River. Not the St. Johns River beast. No, Pinky, because he's the color of boiled shrimp. And he almost sank a steamer in the 1800s and stuff like that. He's been around for a long time. But could be an albino manatee that people are misidentifying and stuff. But it's one of those Florida legends, but people love him, so we got a nice drawing of him that people love to wear. People come up showing us their necklaces they got of him. erieflorida.com. You can find all of our social media links through there. You can find our YouTube stuff, and hopefully when the series goes up, it'll be right off of that. The old haunted house stuff is still there on hellview.net. You can find some of the old videos and some of the old stories.
Yeah, I'll put some of the links up on my Paranormal Dimensions page for the shows, for the support for the show. And, people will be able to, when they hear this show, they may well go and have a look at some of your other bits and pieces.
No, but wonderful.
So that's the dark side of the Sunshine State, as you say.
Yeah, it's you see the best thing to describe it is if you look at Florida from above, from space, especially at night, you see all those twinkling lights on the beaches because that's where everybody lives. And then a little further in, you see these big bursts of light, and that's the cities that support the beaches. Miami, Fort Lauderdale, St. Pete, Tampa, and Pensacola, and Jacksonville. And then you go a little further inland, and it's dark.
Yeah.
Nothing. And then you see little blips of light here and there because that's, the little cities and stuff that are out there. But those are usually the Green Swamp, the Ocala National Forest, the Everglades. And that's the area where we find so much of our stuff. And that's the dark side of the Sunshine State. Off the interstates, off the beaten path. Sometimes right under your own feet. We got some ghost stories from Disney and Universal and all that as well from employees. But, but in the beach towns, every town has a ghost story, so, and almost every one of them has a ghost tour as a cottage industry. But, there's plenty more to see. We want you to come see more than just, theme parks and beaches. You get a lot of history here as well, and some spooky stuff.
Well, the good thing is, a lot of us Brits do go to Florida for their holidays, so there may be a good reference from, this show, the people who might want to come and visit and see some of, what you've got to show, your books, and I may be looking up your books and things.
Yep. Plus, you can always drop us a line if you got your own stories. We love hearing them, and like I said, we're expanding, so we'd love to hear stories from everyone now. So.
And I've got to say, I did like the little bit when on top of your books there, on your advert, it says "Read in peace." I think that sort of sums it up.
that's pretty much. Yeah, we used to have "Batty About Books" was our first one, and "Read in Peace." I think
who thought that one up? That's really good.
Yeah, we like that one. And then, we have a tendency when we are signing off, we do say, "See you on the other side." So that's our goodbye.
You can close this show like that, Mark.
All right, I'll be happy to do that. So shall we now?
We can do. Yeah, I think unless you want to tell us any more stories. I think we've covered quite a lot, and
I think we have, and I don't want to. We always want to leave them with something to, leave them hungry for more.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
And I'll be happy to come on another time and tell some more if you get an outcry of demand. So from all of us here at Erie, Florida, we will see you on the other side.
Thank you very much, Mark. It's been a pleasure having you on. Thank you.
As always, a pleasure. Can't wait to do it again.
Yeah. Thank you, my friend. Bye-bye. And, you've been listening to the Paranormal UK Radio Network, Paranormal Dimensions. I'm David Young, and goodbye. And thank you again, Mark. Bye-bye. Paranormal Dimensions is a regular feature on Mondays on the Paranormal UK Radio Network.